Self-observation means observing the way in which our suggestions have affected our behavior. This self-observation calls for rank self-scrutiny, but is carried out solely for the purpose of discovering our mistakes so that we may avoid or overcome them. Watch for the negative moods in yourself. When in these moods, the most profitable observations can be made. For example, if a thought such as, "I am not making sufficient progress," occurs, do not repress it. Do not conceal your doubts from yourself. Suggestion can rid you of them, but you cannot put anything right until you know what it is that is wrong. Self-honesty is necessary in observing oneself. It is no good attempting to concentrate on the bright side and to pretend that the dark side does not exist. Repression is permissible as a temporary expedient and, in many cases, is a necessary measure to free our minds to carry on our everyday occupation. But as a permanent policy, it is disastrous, for it succeeds only when our energy level is sufficiently high to inhibit or repress the unwanted thoughts, emotions, and compulsions. Self-observation, or the observing of other people, gives ample proof that until an individual has arrived at a certain stage in development, self-control is lessened through shocks, fatigue, and illness. Courage, endurance, and willpower are needed to repress difficulties, doubts, and fears, but courage of a different order is required to be frank with ourselves and to admit our limitations. It might appear that to admit one's limitations, doubts, and fears would cause one to lose ground, but in actual fact, through frank admission of our limitations comes strength of a new order. We no longer make impossible demands upon ourselves. We can afford to make reverses. It is no longer a question to do or die. A negative mood, a shock, or some reverse in an episode, and not a major defect, once one acquires this wider and more flexible strategy. When we gain a more realistic appraisal of our strengths and weaknesses, we can extend a new tolerance to ourselves and to others, for we cannot be kind to others until we can be kind to ourselves. With this alteration in our attitude, we can view our shortcomings with tolerance, for criticism must be kind to be constructive. In observing oneself, whilst carrying on the day's work, note the incidents which affect you adversely, whether they be people, your own thoughts, actions, foods, incidents, or any other circumstances. A sound method is to write down the next two incidents which annoy or irritate you, the next two which make you sad, the next two which create tension, the next two which make you feel pleased with yourself. If something causes you to be tense, afraid, annoyed, pleased, reflect and ask yourself questions about this reaction. Why did I feel like that? At whom or at what was the feeling directed? What caused the emotion or physical disturbance? These reactions reveal the hidden character structure which can only be learned by these devious approaches. Self-observation is strictly practical work which can be aided by asking oneself questions such as, what is the biggest mistake I have made today? What have I learned today? In watching for results from the suggestions you have given yourself, it is important to remember that there is frequently a time lag between suggestions being given and their fulfillment. Sometimes it is necessary to continue suggestions for some time before their effects are noticed, for frequently inner resistances have to be overcome. If it were not for this fact, all suggestions, both good and bad, would become immediately effective. Be on your guard for a short time after having successfully achieved a change in habit. In an unguarded moment, before the new habit has become firmly established, it is easy to slide back. Carry on with your suggestions for a few days in order to consolidate the position. For example, if someone, through suggestion, had given up smoking, it would be wise for a few days to continue to suggest, I have given up smoking and will not smoke again. I will not be caught off my guard when someone offers me a cigarette. I will not be talked into smoking. The purpose of observing oneself is to note the changes which you have effected in yourself as a result of your self-suggestions. Note the improvements and benefits you have achieved, as these evidences of successful self-suggestion make further advances easier and also consolidate the improvements made and bed them down into permanent habits. Where your self-suggestions have not met with the success you anticipated, do not let this discourage you. The technique of suggestion is something to be learned and is one in which the beginner, as in any other subject, will have failures. Where there are failures, change the type of suggestion. Approach your objective from another angle. The intelligent application of self-suggestion calls for careful thought and constant revision of suggestions. It is a means to an end. You are the only one who knows the particular difficulties and problems with which you are faced, the disabilities, habits, and attitudes of which you wish to rid yourself, and the life you desire to live in the future. To attain these ends, it may be necessary for you to frequently reshape your suggestions, guided by what is learned during self-observation. As a result of self-observation, some people find that they have not the time to carry out exercises. Others find that they forget to carry them out. If these obstacles arise, then some action should be taken. It is only by facing facts that we can alter ourselves. It must not be forgotten that the majority of resolutions that people make are forgotten, for the line of least resistance is to do today what we did yesterday, and most likely we will do the same tomorrow. Habits are strong, and some persistence in effort is necessary if we are to effect changes in ourselves. If you should suddenly realize that you have forgotten to carry out an exercise or something you have planned, close your eyes and mentally repeat very rapidly to yourself, I will not forget, I will not forget, I will not forget. Spend a minute or two doing this. It is also a very sound idea to fall back on mechanical reminders, such as carrying round written instructions to oneself, or to carry out waking suggestions at certain times, before every meal, when you get up, before going to sleep, every time the sun goes down, or if you're indoors, when the lights are switched on. 2 minutes waking suggestion, three or four times a day, will affect a great deal of influence on one's life if one is sincere in desiring what one asks for. Obviously, suggestions would, in cases of forgetfulness, be directed towards curing this shortcoming, which could, if allowed to go unchecked, bring your efforts to effect alterations in yourself through this course to a standstill. In cases such as this, suggestions would be on the following lines. I am not going to forget. I will remember more easily in future. From now on, I shall do my practice more regularly. If your self-suggestions has for a while been progressing well and you seem to come to a standstill or to have setbacks, there will be reasons for this. Try to find them out. It may be caused by a chill, a slight indisposition, the results of unusual physical or mental efforts, disruption of one's affairs, or some temporary disturbances. These changes may produce temporary setbacks and should be taken into account. Planned suggestions directed specifically towards them can do much to ameliorate or offset these disturbances. Sometimes people encounter setbacks because their attempt to progress too rapidly, and if the individual tries to force himself or to progress too rapidly, unconscious resistances may come into operation. The changes which are being produced by suggestion are a natural process, and the time taken to affect them varies according to the difficulties, inner resistances, strength of existing habits, and particular circumstances in the life of each individual. The golden rule in suggestion technique is no forcing. Do not force the suggestion. Gentle persistence is the keynote. If something disturbs or upsets you during the day, having taken what practical action you can to deal with the incident, its possible consequences, and to prevent its repetition, put the matter from your mind, for suggestions dealing with the matter can be framed later when you are replanning your suggestions. To banish difficulties from one's mind consciously is not necessarily a harmful repression, for in other words, there are permissible repressions. Whatever progress you make with trance induction, at every opportunity use waking suggestions, as the object of the self-suggestion techniques is not to conduct one's life by carrying out a series of post-hypnotic suggestions, but by the integration of the unconscious activities with the conscious intellectual activities. Remarkable though the powers of self-suggestion and self-hypnotism may be, they are powerless to alter many conditions of life. They cannot bring back our youth or those we have lost, nor can they make good irreparable physical damage. But through these powers of self-suggestion, we can rise above the inevitable changes that are caused by the passing of time, by altering our attitude towards those circumstances which we are powerless to change. We have so far dealt with a method of relaxation and the first steps in self-suggestion. These two techniques are combined in the self-suggestion sessions which you are now carrying out. Later, we will be dealing with more advanced methods of trance induction. But first, we must give some attention to the way in which we register suggestions in the unconscious mind.